Ladies and gentlemen, it may be the apocalypse. Saudi Arabia's PetroDollar deal with the U.S. expires with no new agreement in place. A PetroDollar agreement with the United States and Saudi Arabia has expired. As per reports, the Gulf nation has decided not to renew the deal that expired on June 9th. The move can be seen as a global finance paradigm shift from the USD as a reserve currency. The termination of the deal may also have implications and consequences for America. The 50-year-old agreement has had significant geopolitical and economic implications. It acted as a catalyst in shaping the global energy market and influencing international relations. The petrodollar system was signed in 1974 as a result of a bilateral agreement between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia. Both nations decided to price and trade oil in U.S. dollars. With oil standardization in terms of dollars, every country purchasing oil from Saudi Arabia would be required to pay in dollars. Several other oil-producing countries also began to standardize their oil pricing in U.S. dollars, which gave push to the petrodollar system. Well, ladies and gentlemen, what does this mean for you? The United States produces very little. The only reason the U.S. economy is as good as it is relative to other nations is that we have global empire. We point guns at other people, we take them over and remove their leaders. Saudi Arabia getting off the petrodollar deal likely means they're going to start trading in other currencies as well, which means no one has any reason to buy U.S. dollars. The way it worked is rather simple. If a country, we'll just call it country A. How about Freedomistan? We'll call it Freedomistan. They want oil. What do they have to do? They have to trade Freedomistani currency for U.S. dollars first, then buy oil in U.S. dollars. There's faster ways of transacting and doing the flip, but basically this means the Freedomistani currency must be strong. The nation typically has to maintain higher exports than imports, selling more than they're buying so that their buying power stays strong and they can buy oil for their country. The United States doesn't do that. The United States just creates currency upon the issuance of debt and then buys oil with it. Now, if the Biden administration or anyone else just buys a ton of oil by printing money and producing debt, then you'll get inflation. This means something magical is about to happen. It means if the petrodollar system breaks, the economy will likely implode and you will all find your standard of living miserable. The U.S. does not produce enough to maintain a strong currency. It's the petrodollar that allows the currency to be strong. That is, what does the U.S. produce? Dollars. What are dollars good for? Buying oil. Not anymore. So now why is anyone going to buy dollars? They're not. So the value of the dollar is going to start sinking. Your buying power is going to collapse. Good luck. I have no answers. I'm not an economist.
I find this to be one of the most fascinating things to happen. I mean, the decision tree spiral from this is first of all, let it be said that this would never have happened under Donald Trump. Saudi Arabia loved Donald Trump. And they hated the second half of the Biden administration and of the Obama administration and Joe Biden. You know, a lot of this comes down to the fact that Saudi Arabia has been essentially our vassal in the Middle East for oil and the economics of that for a century effectively. And I heard something really interesting by Snowden on a Joe Rogan interview a few years ago, and I've been meaning to go back and track down the clip because I can't get it out of my head when I see this, which is that Snowden let slip, and I don't know where he got this information or how strongly he sort of was suggesting that this was true, but he in one of his, I think, 2 Joe Rogan appearances, he appeared to insinuate that U.S. intelligence that Saudi intelligence had awareness that Khashoggi was involved in a U.S. sort of in organizing a kind of U.S. Backed coup of the Saudi government, and that was part of the calculus of their assassination in the embassy of Khashoggi. And I find that to be really interesting because Obama really alienated Saudi Arabia with the Iran deal. By opening up Iran's oil and gas exports, it effectively makes Iran a regional rival to Saudi Arabia, whose entire economy revolves on their regional energy dominance. And Iran actually has, I believe, more gross exploitable oil and gas than Saudi Arabia if they were allowed to export to full capacity. And the Obama administration opening them up and partnering with them through the Iran deal brought Saudi Arabia and Israel into a joint. This is actually sort of the roots of the Abraham Accords, which is that the Biden administration and the Obama administration with the Iran deal in 2015, by building up Iran and Qatar by proxy, they were effectively creating a security threat to Israel because that money would go to pay for Hamas and Hezbollah, and an economic threat to Saudi Arabia because now they'd lose a huge amount of their market share because now there'd be all this Iranian oil, and then it would drive down the price of the oil that they do sell because you have all this new supply on the market. And so this basically put Israel and Saudi Arabia into a partnership for the first time in decades, which was brokered by the Trump administration. The first act, if you remember, that Trump did when he took office was to kill that Iran energy deal. And so MBS and Saudi Arabia loved Trump and then immediately went hostile on Biden. And I can't help, if part of that has to do with the current policies that the Biden administration have on Iran, the backdoor Iran deal they effectively have, allowing China to have this $400 billion oil and gas deal with Iran, evading the sanctions, while Hunter was actually partnered with the Chinese energy company doing that. And then you have, same company, but but this Hunter 5-6 years ago. And then you have, I can't help but think that Saudi Arabia sees the trajectory of the United States under a sort of permanent Biden government as being something that's going to coup Saudi Arabia from the inside and bankrupt them from the outside. And so they are now breaking this 50-year petrodollar pledge and saying, listen, you're gonna sink, and we're gonna partner with China, and they're gonna be our new U.S. Big Daddy.
Joe Biden is not inspiring confidence in anybody, and so I can't imagine anybody's going to think. Imagine you want to go start a business with someone, you want to enter into a contract with someone. Let's say you want to make a comic book, and you need a guy who can, come up with ideas. You're a great artist, and then you meet Joe Biden. You gonna do a deal with him?
It's actually great you bring that up, because just today it was announced at the G7 summit that the U.S. Treasury is going forward with this plan to fund Ukraine with frozen Russian assets.
That's right. Yeah.
So we had it. We've always, just sort of putting on the State Department hat here, we've always made the argument that you should invest in the United States instead of China because, hey, China is an autocratic government. You never know if your investment's going to be safe because any day the CCP could just nationalize your company, take all your assets. Haven't really done it before, but the looming threat of it, because of the way their system works, is always the sword of Damocles hanging above you. So Brazil, you should be using our phones instead of Huawei. You should be using Amazon instead of Alibaba. You should be investing your assets on U.S. territory instead of in Chinese territory. And now the State Department and the Treasury have just done the big bad, apocalypse claim. We've always been saying for like 30 years now that China might do someday, and that's the reason they're bad. It's the same thing with the prosecutions, where they're saying, Trump is threatening to prosecute people while they're actually doing it. But they made a deal under our legal system as it existed at the time. Like the Russians, hate the Russians, think they're the worst thing, think Putin is Hitler. They invested the assets in this country. They did not attack the United States. Whatever you want to say they did, it happened 8,000 miles away to another foreign country. If the new terms of dealing with the United States is anytime we squint and say, hey, you know what? We think you attack democracy, some ethereal concept, then billions, basically, I think it's like $200 or $300 billion of total frozen Russian assets. I know that there was $3 billion that they pledged that they're immediately taking to fund Ukraine with. Why would you do a deal with this country, in this way? I mean, if this is not reversed immediately, this is going to be catastrophic diplomatically.
But it won't be reversed immediately, right? Like, we're kind of in gridlock, in free fall in terms of our foreign policy, in my eyes, until we figure out who's going to handle the next 4 years.
You could see a world where Trump wins the presidency, and some of what has happened, some of the worst excesses, not all of it, but some of the worst excesses just sort of feel like a bad dream. They threatened to do this. They did a little bit of damage, but it was stopped before it's too late. America gets to preserve the century of diplomatic statecraft that we'd had for that time. You say, okay, there was a period where we went off the rails, but we reined it in quickly. And this actually shows how robust our system is, that even when we do overstretch, even when we look like we're going to renege on this deal, even when it actually is safe, because we will always be able to catch ourselves. And that it's just one more reason why the fate of the universe kind of hangs in the balance this November.
Well, what really cracked me up about the people that were at the G7 that were making this catastrophic deal is that 6 out of the 7 leaders are all unpopular. Like, they have insane internal struggles in their own country. Like, Politico had a great report about this where they said this is the meeting of the lame ducks. So, I mean, you have unpopular leaders that are making deals that are catastrophic. Like, that's pretty much where we're at.
Thanks for watching this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to check out the live show Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. on this channel. Subscribe, and we'll see you all there.